Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of this interview project. Today, I'm very honored to say that I have a very special guest, and I emphasize that writer and showrunner Hamish Steele. Welcome, sir.
Hi, it's great to meet you. Thank you for having me.
It's great to meet you, too. And if we're all ready for that, we can get down to the first order of business, which is we obviously can't talk about you or your career without talking about what is perhaps your biggest success, Dead End, of course. But
Mhm.
first, before we get on to the first order of that, I do want to give you a little time to promote your upcoming project, which is Go Man, if there's anything you can say without spoiling anything. Um, I'd like
Sure.
to let you do that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Go Man comes out August 26th. It's the first of a new series, and it is inspired by my love of Godzilla and Power Rangers and all that kind of stuff. All told from the perspective of an autistic superhero, I guess. It's just this boy called Toby. He turns into this giant superhero called Go-Man. And I am being a little bit vague on the details in the ways I've been promoting it, but it's because it's a little shorter than the Dead Endia books, but there's a lot more story to tell as the series goes on. And so once the first book is out and we can all talk about the plot more openly, yeah, there's a lot more to say. But if you like monsters and if you like Dead End and just the work I do, then I think you'd enjoy it.
Well, I certainly enjoy the work you do, and of course, there's only so much you can say without spoiling anything.
Hmm.
And it is, as you said, coming out this August, so don't spoil anything. I will certainly want to see all of it. I'll buy it. Hopefully, all the fans will buy it because they need to. And in any case, you had mentioned in your previous interview that a kaiju sort of thing was the thing you were originally planning on wanting to work on before Dead End got into the
Yeah.
works. And back then, kaiju stuff was not really valued as much as it is now. And in that case, we're going to move on to Dead End because, while certainly that is something that is coming out, we have your biggest thing that we're going to get onto now. So, of course, there's a lot that can be said in terms of Dead End, in terms of the queer representation, the amount of wonderful storylines, and of course, the great croissant Courtney. But what I most want to talk about today is perhaps something that is near and dear to my heart, autistic representation in the show. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to let you start off with that because, of course, Norma is a wonderful character and there's a lot to be said about her. And I think it would be appropriate to let you introduce her in some way that's appropriate.
Yeah. So I'm always really touched when people say that she means a lot to them or we did the representation right because it's something I was kind of nervous about going in. And in general, you know, more representation is always good representation. And no one character is going to represent everybody, especially autism when obviously it's such a spectrum. So I was nervous because I knew I wanted to do it right. With Norma, I've told the story before, but to new viewers or people who want a summary, um, Dead End is based on a web comic, and when I was making the web comic, it was I wasn't thinking too much about representation. I was just trying to make the characters relatable. And so that's why the characters are queer and that's why the characters are neurodiverse, is because those were me and my friends. Um, and I hadn't really thought about Norma in terms of being autistic. I just wanted to make Norma how I felt about situations. And so I was writing a lot of her anxieties, but also some of the things she struggled with that other people found really easy, stuff about remembering people's names and eye contact and socializing and all of these things. And especially because in the first issue of the comic, Barney is the one that's introduced as the kind of audience surrogate, we call it in writing, or the character you're supposed to relate to who is walking into a magical world. And in the first issue of the comic, it's a little different in the show. Norma is already part of this world and she understands it. And for the first issue or two, Norma kind of seems like the one who um understands just like what's going on and is kind of the reliable voice. And then in the third issue, which is the third episode of the TV series, they're a bit different, but it's the speech episode. And we see how Norma is, she's fine with like demons and magic and stuff, but when it comes to a social situation where it's like team building exercises and all of that, she really struggles. And when people were reading the webcomic, they started messaging me saying, I headcanon Norma is autistic or is Norma autistic? And it became something that I kind of realized while writing the comic. So when we came to make the show, that's when we started making it a lot more intentional. And we had a consultant come on who wasn't autistic. And while I think her heart was in the right place and she seems like a good person. Um, it was kind of during the production of the show where I realized that I'm going to be getting a lot of opinions from people who think they know better than me on what good representation is. And I had to actually listen to myself. And it was the same with like the trans writers on the show and even our voice cast, where you're going to hear a lot of advice from experts on what is and isn't good representation. But ultimately, if you're making a show about you, if you're happy with it, then you can't really go wrong. You're telling your story and your experiences. And that's kind of what Norma is. So I'm really touched that Norma relates to so many people. I think one of the reasons sometimes autism representation it doesn't work is that it comes from a committee of people who I think that they have like kind of a checklist of things that autistic people all should have. And so you end up with characters who seem to have like every trait there is. You know, they seem to be like super geniuses and they seem to have be experts in everything. And there's no situations that they can handle. And it all becomes a little unrealistic, I think. So early on when writing Normal, we sort of wrote down what she struggles with, what she excels at. Um, and even when writing something like Go Man, you're always trying to make sure that even if there's certain things about being autistic that make you really great at something, it's never really a superpower in and of itself. So I like that Norma is specifically in a situation that she is really excelling at, which is she has a special interest in the theme park. So she's kind of in her element. But it's not a coincidence that she's there. She wanted this job. She's like manufactured a life in a way that she thinks she'd be good at. Um, and I think it's just nice because I'm sorry to ramble, but one of the things the expert said, and I don't want to name her because I do think her heart's in the right place. Um, but when we were talking about casting, and this was before I kind of disclosed that I was on the spectrum, she was talking about like, oh, you probably shouldn't get an autistic actor because they're unreliable and things like that. Or it'll be really hard to work with them. And I was sitting there thinking, well, I'm meant to be running the show, and if anyone is thinking that I can't do this job, that's really bad, you know? So it I've always been very like protective of Norma, I suppose. If people criticize her or don't think she's good representation, I don't really mind. But what matters to me is that she's a good representation of, I guess, of me and my struggles. And as long as I am telling the truth about what it's like to be Norma, um, then I know I've done as good a job as I can.
Well, yeah, and of course, don't worry about rambling. It helps fill the time. But actually, that does lead me perfectly into my next question, which is you've mentioned, of course, that Norma is based on some of your experiences living in this world. And I just
Yeah.
kind of wanted to ask if you're comfortable with it. Would you be comfortable sharing some of the experiences that inspired Norma, if you're comfortable with that?
Yeah, so a couple of just simple things. In the books, especially, she has this kind of trait where she forgets people's names. And I always thought that was me being really rude, but it's more to do with I realize that when I'm talking to people, it is really hard for me to take in a lot of the information, partially because I'm often not looking people in the eye or just my focus on subjects that aren't interesting to me. And these are kind of traits that are hard because I do think they're negative. They can come across as rude, but it's really hard. It's something. It's one of the few things I wish I could explain to people better that it's not me not being interested. It's me like struggling against all the information. So I think Norma having these little nicknames and ways of circumventing this is something I've done over the past. And the thing that I also wanted to represent with Norma is quite often when you get autistic characters, they have like a special interest in like medicine or science or things that like makes them kind of really useful in a detective show or something. And Norma's special interest is in an actor and a celebrity in like a bunch of films, which in the grand scheme of things, it might not seem like a very useful skill. But obviously, in the plot of Dead End, it means that she's like vital to the team. And I think the thing I wanted to represent was that uh, the feeling of being kind of betrayed by your special interest. So if people haven't seen the show, I won't give too much away, but she is let down by her celebrity that she's knows everything about. And the thing I wanted to make sure we did was that she's not wrong for having had the special interest. It's not a story about how, well, you shouldn't be that obsessed with celebrities. Um, she, as something that I know to be very true about autistic people, is it can be heartbreaking when that stuff happens. But on a whole, I find autistic people to care very much about like justice and what's right and wrong. And so when they find out that someone's bad, they're sometimes the first to like flip and be their most kind of vocal critiques. So it takes an episode for Norma to like process um, finding out that her idol's bad. But then she becomes the main one to like call her out as much as possible. And in season two, she gets this new special interest in kind of demons and demonology. And it's kind of tied as well to her sense of justice and right and wrong. So that kind of experience has happened to me where like various people I've like really been obsessed with or looked up to have let me down. Um, and it's not all on them as much as it's it's just like it is hard to sort of have a special interest in another human being because you don't own them, you don't control them, they can do what they want. So if they do or say something you don't agree with, it can feel like a betrayal even if they're in their right to be themselves. So I'm really pleased with, especially she has this song in the episode uh
You're
all
my
about that. Yeah.
Frankenstein.
And beautiful. I just think that that's a kind of emotion I've never really seen depicted, like a really specific experience. I think a lot of autistic people have had. And yeah, so those are some elements. And again, we try to be very careful in those episodes with how other characters were treating her. Like Courtney kind of says the wrong thing. Some of Norma's other friends are more supportive or understanding. Um, and yeah, it's like an ongoing kind of relationship she has with that idol throughout the show. So those are a couple of things. And then just like little things. When we were animating her, we like put in a couple of kind of stims she does, and just things. And we had like autistic storyboarders and animators and stuff who were like putting in their own ideas, but we tried to make sure that they were consistent. Like she didn't just have 100 different stims or things. She does like a few things she does that are quite consistent.
Yeah, and of course, as we know, it is a spectrum, so not everyone
Yeah.
is gonna think in certain ways or have the same strengths and weaknesses. And of
Mhm.
course, that's something here in the United States, Rude Fricker Crud has to understand. But
Mhm.
we're not going to talk about politics. And a part of that that you mentioned does lead perfectly into my next thing, which is special interests, of course,
Mhm.
which is the one thing I personally can really relate to because a lot of autistic people, I can't speak for every autistic person, but a lot of autistic people do really have those special interests that are incredibly special to your life. And I'm not going to talk about mine, but I guess maybe you could share some of yours because that would be hopefully very fun for you and also would help fill the time.
Well, I love Godzilla. It's like you mentioned, I wanted to do a kaiju thing for a really long time. Um, I initially wanted to do a kaiju or Godzilla comic before Dead End, but I um didn't think I could draw the amount of like city stuff. I'd have to draw like buildings from different angles being destroyed, all this perspective stuff. I still struggle with it, but it's been a nice challenge. So I kind of always knew my whole life I would do a kaiju book or something. I've got various Godzilla things dotted around me. And actually, Godzilla, I think, is part of a interest I've always had. Like I was a dinosaur kid, then it turned into Godzilla. I love crocodile. I got a crocodile tattoo. Um, I love just like
Fabulous.
reptiles, dinosaurs. Always picked Yoshi in Mario Kart. Like anything that was like that, I was always fascinated with. Um, and I think a lot of kids love dinosaurs, but a real turning point for me was my school went on a school trip to a zoo, and all the kids got to hold a tarantula, and I was too scared to hold it, and I was like having a meltdown. Um, and so someone at the zoo saw me and instead gave me a gecko to hold. And so I held a gecko in my hands for like as long as it took the rest of my class to like each hold the tarantula for a minute. And so I got like obsessed. So I went through like a huge gecko phase. I never had one. I never owned any reptiles, but I was like just reading everything about them, drawing them on everything. My like username was gecko something. So yeah, I had a real reptile and I still do kind of phase in love. And then I guess my other big one is Doctor Who, which
Woo-hoo-hoo!
yeah, Doctor Who really taught me how to write. Um it's a show that in its opening title sequence has the lead actors' names and then the writer of the episode's name really big. And so it was kind of one of the first shows where I became aware of how different episodes would have different writing styles, and you became aware of which kind of writers wrote which kind of episodes and which ones you liked. And when the show came back in 2005, I like bought every like magazine or interview with the writers and just tried to like learn how TV production made. And that was when I was like, I want to make a TV show. Um, and even though Dead End and Doctor Who are kind of different, there's a lot of the same I sort of like understanding of how a TV show is like structured in there. Like it has the same kind of teasing of villains that come back in the season finale in like two-part season finale as well, both times. And just the kind of like to me that's like what a TV show feels like. And uh I'm a real ride or die Doctor Who. Like I kind of like it all and I criticize it Sorry, my dog might be making noises in the background.
Oh, don't
Um,
mind.
but so yeah, those are the two big ones for me.
Well, and of course, you really get me with the whole thing where I don't know. Well, actually, no, maybe not get me, but I can really relate to the whole thing, like drawing of geckos and like your special interest there, because I can really feel the whole sensation of nerding out over something that you just really, really love like that. And
Yeah.
I'm not too much of a Doctor Whovian, but um I can certainly, and of course, I've seen some of the stuff that you've displayed with the whole Whovian loving, and I can just really appreciate that. It's good to have a special interest. A lot of autistic, I can't speak for everyone again, but it's just lovely to talk about that. I'm just going to skip a couple of my things I was going to ask because you've already covered them, which is good. One thing I do want to talk about in terms of Dead End, which everyone who follows you absolutely loves. I want to talk about the probably one of the harder parts of your time writing it, which is the whole cancellation of the show, which is hard for all the fans, hard for me, of course, but hard for you probably. And I just kind of want to talk about that a little. And I guess what was the whole experience show running the show?
So it was obviously tough for me, but I the thing when I got the news, I truly my and I don't mean this in a kind of like selfless way, like truly my first thought was how am I going to tell the fans? And that's what made me most upset because when you're making a TV show, the th sort of threat that you'll never get to make any more is kind of looming over you the whole time. And especially because you pitch it and that whole process takes so long that from the second you're making the show, you're kind of kicking yourself and feeling how lucky you are. So when it gets taken away, it's not the biggest surprise. And my feeling overall is like I'm so happy we got to make what we could. But it was frustrating because um, for the last few months, we really thought we were going to get a third season. I've spoken a little bit about how we were writing season three. We did some character designs. We had like the plot laid out, and that was stuff that we had to show Netflix, and kind of they weighed that stuff up with our budget and um, you know, all kinds of stuff to make that decision and like the viewership and things. Um, so it was really sad, but because we left it on this cliffhanger, which again was like we thought about not doing that and I don't know, it was hard to really work out exactly what to do. It was kind of like a risk that didn't pay off. Um, but like I said, like my feeling overall is that I was pleased with what we did. Um, and even now I'm like meeting people who've like just finished watching it or and they ask me like when's season three coming out? And I have to like keep breaking the news over and over again. I think the other thing I'd just like to say, like I do get emails or DMs like very frequently asking me either like giving me ideas on how to bring it back or like telling me, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Or people saying, why did you choose to cancel it? And I'm like, it wasn't my choice. I really didn't want to. And I think the thing I always want to tell people is we did try everything. So like we pitched to season three, and then when we realized that wasn't going to happen, we were like, well, maybe we could like wrap it up in three episodes or like a special or whatever. Um, and I don't super blame Netflix because I mean, they cancel a lot, but they also commission a lot. And I didn't like burn any bridges there or leave on bad terms because I might work with them again. Like they do commission a lot of animation. So you know, I just think we just didn't have the right numbers that they wanted. So I kind of saw it coming, but telling everyone was the hardest bit, and it still hurts whenever I have to break that news.
Well, and of course, things will be what things will be. But of course, the good news is there is Dead End Book number three, which has a good conclusion to at least the book part of the series. And that's a happy ending in that sort of
Mhm.
situation. I will have to ask, though, if you did do a season three, and I'm sure you've been asked
Mhm.
this before, would it have been similar to book three or would it have been different?
So the thing about book three is that from the characters' perspectives, a lot of book three happens quite quickly. Like it's kind of a day in their lives, then the apocalypse happens, and then they're in a kind of new world, and then it's the final battle. So I've sometimes tried to explain it that so book three would have kind of been the finale of season three, and it would have had just a much longer build up to it. So I've actually put the first script um, for season three on my Patreon. Um, so you can read it. And one of the differences is that in the books, um, I'm just going to do some spoilers, but I think they're well worth reading anyway. But the character of Courtney at the end of book two kind of joins the angels. Um, and in season three, well, by the end of season two, that hasn't happened yet in the show. So um, a lot of the season three plot line was going to be talking about uh, how people kind of get sucked up into believing bad things. So it's kind of intentional that throughout season one and two, there's a recurring kind of joke where Barney and Norma, well, like Courtney will be like, "Why don't you guys trust me?" And they're like, "Ugh." Um, and it's meant to be a joke, but in season three, this the leader of the Angels, Pale, was basically going to, um, for lack of a better word, like groom Courtney into the Angels by saying like, "I trust you. You're amazing. You're perfect. Join us." So Courtney was going to join the Angels, but it would have taken like the whole season. Um, and just to get kind of technical with it, a lot of the plot revolves around this thing called the spell of division and who is going to perform it. So in the book, it's different, but in season three, it was going to be Pale trying to convince Courtney to perform this spell. So that whole like spell of division thing, which is kind of the like inciting incident of book three, would have been around like the episode seven mark. Um, and then episode eight would be like a whole episode bringing back Pugsley. And then nine and 10 was going to be like the big final battle ish. Maybe I'm getting it a bit wrong. But like we were still by the time the show was cancelled, we were still like trying to figure all of this out. And it would have changed when we were writing it and storyboarding it and everything anyway. Um, so it's sad we didn't get to make it. I still hold out hope that like one day we might be able to. You never really know. With the entertainment industry, things are changing all the time. There might be a day where we like suddenly get all the rights back. Um, but it might not be for a while. So I'm focusing on like new projects at the moment. So
But you
otherwise
know,
I
oh, sorry.
just no, yeah, but otherwise I'd just be like sat here sulking.
Well, in any case, I really would like to thank you for the show, for the experience of watching all those episodes. Without the show, I never would have happened upon the books or your other stuff. So you're very talented, and I think the show is definitely something I'm grateful I happened upon. And hopefully one day you'll get to do another show. whether that's Dead End Season 3 or something new altogether, maybe Go Man. But in any case, I do want to go back to special interests for 1 second because, of course, as I don't know if if you've mentioned, I don't know. Actually, you haven't mentioned this, but in the books, of course, Norma doesn't really have all that much of a special interest. I think it's accurate to say, but in the
Yeah.
show, she does. And that's something that, just a small bit of a difference that I think, I've seen people say makes all the difference for the show rather than the books, if that's appropriate to say.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, when I was making the comics, it wasn't as intentional, the representation. Um, and sometimes I describe like season two ends with Norma being quite kind of depressed. And I sometimes say that the show, it's not literally this, obviously, but the show kind of is an origin story for book Norma. And if we'd done season three, Norma would have been a little bit more depressed and in that kind of headspace. Um, and genuinely, the reason why the special interest was invented was in my first draft of the script for the first episode, it was very similar to the books, and Norma was already working at Dead End and already knew Barney. And we were writing drafts, and we realized that if this show as a whole is about the found family feeling, we should probably meet them before they know each other, and we should watch that friendship blossom on screen. Um, Sorry, I'm looking after my dog at the moment.
Oh,
Um,
cute little baby.
uh, and so that was how the scripts were working, and then it just didn't really make sense. And so again, we changed it so they didn't know each other, which meant that we didn't have someone in the script explaining everything to the audience. Because originally Norma worked there, so she was explaining things to Barney. But if neither of them worked there, how are we going to like explain all the stuff about Pauline and the park and everything? So we decided to make her have a special interest, specifically as like a script writing problem solving thing. But from that point, it like exploded into the whole like story arc of the season. Um, so yeah, it's always just a bit of writing advice I give people like do problem solving, but like um uh do it with kind of like enthusiasm and like optimism that it will create some good story ideas.
Well, it definitely has, in my opinion. And the one last question I do want to ask you, I'd have probably a lot more to say. We could talk
Mhm.
for hours on this,
Mhm.
but the one last question I do want to ask is, in terms of Norma, do you think the autistic characters in Go Man, will strike the same sort of feeling and good vibes as Norma did in Dead End? What is your exact sort of feeling on that? What do you predict?
I'm interested because something with Go Man is that I went in knowing that Toby, the main character, was going to be autistic. But when writing it, I kind of realized that it's actually a story about two characters on the spectrum, kind of at different places in the spectrum, becoming friends, and how that's wonderful, but also can be hard. Because I find there's a sentiment actually in the book that I briefly mention, and that I've adapted that to basically a lot of the storyline where sometimes like what people's needs are aren't really like collaborative. I don't know, not collaborative. They don't really fit together. Like I sometimes find sometimes you go to like autism friendly experiences, cinemas, whatever, and I love that those exist, but it's hard to work out like, some people love the lights on, some people want the lights off, some people need the volume loud, some people need the volume soft. So a lot of what Go Man 1 Volume 1 deals with is these characters of Toby and Grace. Toby is the I would say, more introverted and shy. He has lots of special interests, but they're kind of quite technical and no one else really shares them. And Grace is a lot more, she can talk for hours about her interests and is like much more, um, her kind of social awkwardness comes from not knowing when to like hold back, whereas Toby doesn't know how to like come out of a shell. So it's them becoming friends, and then once they're friends, they're like, you know, friends for life. And so I think Goma, like Norma is autistic, and I do think you can maybe read things into other characters, but she's sort of on her own in that story. Whereas Goman's a lot more about the community and how we can all help each other. Um, and like Toby's Goman persona is all about masking, basically. So when he becomes Goman, he puts on a superhero mask, but when he's Go-Man, he might feel a bit more confident or like people like Go-Man more than they like Toby, but putting on that mask for that long really tires him out. And so it's like an ongoing metaphor about that. Um, I think it will be relatable to a lot of people, people who are, you know, autistic and or not, but it's been really nice writing it really like intentionally, and knowing from the start where these characters are going. So
Well, oh, sorry.
no, I
If
just
you were gonna.
I hope people like it.
Well, I am certainly excited for it. I will buy it this fall. I hope everyone else will buy it this fall. You've been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for coming. You've been a wonderful guest.
Thank you very much. You too.
Hamish
You've been a
Steele
great
has been
host.
our guest. He's had a lot of things to say. You can follow him on YouTube, Twitter, although maybe don't use Twitter, but Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, and other places. Follow him there. Till next week, I'm Jonas Tripp. Thank you very much.